July 13th, 2024. Tens of thousands show up to hear Donald Trump speak at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. At 6 p.m., Trump takes the stage to deliver a speech as the crowd explodes in cheer. Behind the scenes, Secret Service is desperately searching for a young man they lost track of that was now perceived by law enforcement as a possible threat. 12 minutes later, shots ring out. The former president is hit and ducks behind the podium. The strong MAGA crowd does not move as expected and stays put in the ultimate show of strength. Suddenly, Trump is helped to his feet and, in an act of ultimate defiance to the would-be assassin or assassins, raises his fist in the air while screaming, "Fight, fight, fight." Welcome to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite, Becoming 47. Welcome back to Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman. And look, before we jump into today's episode and the start of our series regarding the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, I want to shout out a few of our newest global celebrity members on Patreon. And it's important to mention these people support what we do here. There is nothing cheap about podcasting at this level, and these people make it possible. We have some new ones. If I said your name in a prior episode, I'm going to say it again because it's been such a busy week with the scandals that have come out that I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. So Miss Cheryl Ann Reed, thank you so much for your support. And look, y'all, Miss Reed supports a lot of different things we do. I actually met her before, and she is an amazing individual. Her and her family traveled many, many hours to come to New Orleans, Louisiana. And on the way, they stopped and said hello to me here at the studio. So thank you so much, Miss Cheryl, for becoming a member of our global celebrity team. I also want to shout out Miss Dina Mendoza. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. Megan Haley, another big time supporter of ours. Thank you so much. Miss Michelle Carter, thank you so much for joining the global celebrity tier on Patreon. And hopefully I didn't miss anybody. Much love to all of you. We couldn't do it without you. And even our lower tier Patreons, we may not shout you out here on the show. That's a benefit for the global celebrities, but I love each and every one of you. And even if you can't be a supporter for whatever reason, we get it. We understand. Just sharing the show helps us out a lot. So let's jump right into it. And I've done a couple of episodes so far. One I did just last week that we released as a bonus episode for Patreon members only. And that was with Miss Kelly Jennings, who is an absolute expert on all things criminal justice. She came in and we discussed some breaking news in the Trump case. And just prior to that, I released the very first emergency episode that I've released on Exposed, and it has gotten just a ton of play. So go check those out if you haven't already done so. And we're going to jump right into this one. So on Monday, the 22nd, we finally got to hear from the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle. And it's important to note that she was under subpoena to attend this committee hearing. She basically had to be forced. Now, she alludes several times in this hearing that she wanted to be transparent. And hey, I'm here And the fact that I'm here means I'm being transparent. Well, I submit to you that the fact that she had to be subpoenaed to even attend is proof that she was attempting to not be transparent. And sadly, on this day, we didn't really learn much. She just didn't answer many questions. She was, as a matter of fact, very evasive. So we're going to cover that, and I'm going to play you several clips, and they're going to paint a picture of what that hearing sounded like. So we're going to start with someone that is, quite frankly, someone I'm surprised I'm even about to talk about, much less compliment. I'm not a fan of AOC, and in reality, I'm just the opposite. But I have to give her props, and we'll talk about my thoughts on why she was so, well, opposite of what you would think, considering her party, when it came to questioning Director Cheadle. And I've got to give credit where credit's due, right? She challenged the director. So here's a clip of AOC questioning the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, regarding the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump.
Director Cheadle, respectfully, what you had just laid out about 60 days. We are currently in the midst of an especially concentrated presidential campaign in the moment. That is also paired with, of course, elections happening across the country that are happening in about 100 days. So the notion of a report coming out in 60 days when the threat environment is so high in the United States, irrespective of party, is not acceptable. And I think it's very important to understand that. This is not theater. This is not about jockeying. This is about the safety of some of the most highly targeted and valued targets internationally and domestically in the United States of America. So the idea that a report will be finalized in 60 days, let alone prior to any actionable decisions that would be made, is simply not acceptable. It has been 10 days since an assassination attempt on a former president of the United States, regardless of party. There need to be answers. Again, this party, this committee, this is not a moment of theater. We have to make policy decisions, and we have to make them now. We do. And that may be and that may require legislation. That may require policy that we must pass in the immediate term. And without that, we are flying blind. So the lack of answers and the lack of report is just simply not something that we can accept here. Director Cheadle, is there a standard perimeter that the Secret Service establishes around an event, or are those perimeters independently determined per event and scenario?
There is no standard. Every event and every venue is different and treated as such. So each event has a different perimeter that is established depending on the logistics of that event. Now, you established earlier that the building upon which the shooter operated from was outside of that established perimeter, correct, for the Butler, Pennsylvania event? It was outside of our secure perimeter, yes.
Now, that building was, I believe, 500. How far away was that building from the president?
It was approximately 200 yards.
200 yards. Now, the individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why does the Secret Service perimeter, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
And so What I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
A perimeter was established, and even though there were buildings that were outside of that perimeter, it wasn't just that building. There were a number of buildings in the area, and there was overwatch that was created to help mitigate some of those buildings.
Respectfully, Dr. Cheadle, as well, as a person who has experienced an enormous amount of threat incidents, including incidents that have never been reported publicly, there is a common pattern that happens here, whether it's Secret Service, FBI, Capitol Police, local departments. After a critical security failure, we often hear there will be an independent investigation. That independent investigation gets set up. Usually the expectation is between 2 to 3 months after the incident, and then nothing really occurs from there. The report is usually not satisfactory to the questions that are usually being raised here. And most importantly, corrective action is rarely taken. If I were to state anything that I think is profoundly important, is that we need to have answers to the public. Ideally, I would encourage you and the agency to be more forthright with the members that still have yet to have their questioning, because the public deserves to have full confidence, and the stakes are too high. The violence that could break out in this political moment, regardless of party, in the event of someone getting hurt, constitutes a national security threat to the entire country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Could I go back to something you said?
Yes, please. Feel free, Director.
Ma'am, if I could just speak to something you said at the outset when you started your questioning. I want to assure you and everyone on this committee that I'm not waiting for a report to take action. We have been conducting analysis all along, and we have been adding additional features to our security details since this incident occurred.
And I'd hope you can highlight and illuminate what some of those are in the event of other members questioning as well.
Now, the fact is AOC nailed it. But why? Why all of a sudden does she come to essentially the country's defense and honestly even Trump's defense? She's not exactly known for that. She's certainly not a Trump fan. Well, I think AOC, after this incident, has suddenly figured it out. Let's unpack this. Now, there's a certain thing in politics known as establishment politicians. Let's start on the Republican side of that. Who would you consider an establishment Republican? Off the top of my head, Chris Christie comes to mind. He'd be a good example of that. What about Ron DeSantis? Well, I would say he's kind of a hybrid. He's in between establishment and anti-establishment, kind of in the middle. And on the Democratic side, you have, let's say, Barack Obama, definitely an establishment Democrat, probably the establishment, right? Kamala Harris, another establishment Democrat. But what about AOC? She's definitely not an establishment Democrat. She doesn't say everything they want her to say. She doesn't necessarily bow down to that establishment. She would be really the Democratic side's version of what Trump is looked at by establishment Republicans. She's really the anti-establishment Democrat. More of a socialist like Bernie Sanders. So it would not surprise me that when she saw this incident that happened to Donald Trump, somewhere in the back of her mind, she's probably thinking this could happen to me. And that, I submit to you, is why she is so passionate about the fact that this has happened and how horrible it is. Not only from a violent standpoint, but also from a government standpoint. Now, Director Cheadle, she's being evasive to pretty much everyone who asks her questions. Didn't matter who you were, what party you were in. And there were points during this hearing where the chamber actually erupted in laughter after some of her answers. This next clip I'm going to play you, it features questions by definitely an anti-establishment Republican known in political circles as MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And MTG, in only MTG style, ask her some pretty direct and poignant questions. And just listen to this. Listen to how ridiculous the answers were from director Kimberly Cheadle. And here's that clip.
Ms. Cheadle, I'd like to remind you that you're under oath. The site team has a senior supervisor, an advanced team, a protective intelligence team, a counter sniper element, and detail. Who was the agent in charge? How long has she been the agent in charge? And what is her Secret Service background?
So I'm not going to provide a name.
Why not? You're here to answer our questions.
This forum, I'm not going to provide names of.
You stated in your testimony, you said, I am here today to answer your questions.
That is correct.
Answer the question.
I'm not going to provide names of our personnel.
Why not?
Today.
The American people are demanding these answers from you today, Ms. Cheadle.
I will do the best to provide you accurate information based on the facts that I have at this time.
You're not answering our questions. The advance element coordinates with other intel or law enforcement partners, identifies threats and weaknesses at the sites and movements. We'd like a copy of the advance report. Have you brought it here with you today?
We will comply with the request for the documentation that has been requested.
When will that be, Ms. Cheadle? Because you should have brought it today.
I am certain that our personnel are working on obtaining all of that documentation.
I don't believe you, and neither do the people watching this hearing. You're not doing well, as Mr. Moskowitz informed you. You've been sitting here for over 3 hours, and I have you know the entire country is demanding you resign and demanding that you be fired if you do not resign. Things are not going well for you. You need to answer the questions. Was there a protective intelligence team, and what technical resources were utilized for that event, specifically drone or helicopter assets?
There were a number of technical assets that were deployed for that event, and there was a protective intelligence team that was assigned to that event.
Why was Crooks able to fly a drone over the entire area the day of the rally and the day of his assassination attempt?
To my knowledge, he did not fly the drone over the entire area.
How did he fly a drone over the area, period? Any part of the area?
Again, I would have to go back and check the timeline of when that took place and when the event.
Why didn't you bring the timeline with you today to answer our questions?
I don't have all of the answers on the timelines based on the criminal investigation.
Were you not prepared today to answer our questions?
I am prepared to answer the questions based on the information and wanted to be able to provide.
Do you have a timeline at all from any of the day?
I have a timeline that does not have specifics.
That's shocking. That is absolutely unacceptable. That means you are a failure at your job. Let's talk about things that are prohibited in Trump rallies. And I've been to a lot of Trump rallies. Backpacks and bags, bicycles, firearms, any type of weapon, or any other item determined to be a potential safety hazard, like a rangefinder would be one. At 5:10, Crooks is first observed by one of the snipers, AGR Sniper 1, at the building. 5:10, President Trump was shot in the face at 6:11 p.m. 5:28, AGR Sniper 1 takes a picture of a bicycle and 2 bags. Those belong to Crooks. 5:32, AGR Sniper 1 spots Crooks looking at his phone and using a rangefinder. 5:55, Butler ESU Command confirms receipt of photos and states they have been relayed on. 6:05 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 later communicates that Crooks is seen moving northeast in direction of Sheetz and that Crooks has a backpack. 2 minutes before the shooting, while President Trump has been allowed to take the stage, people see Crooks laying on his stomach in a sniper position on the roof, and they're yelling he has a gun, and they are trying to alert law enforcement and Secret Service. Why was Crooks not shot by the snipers? Why was he allowed to be there?
As soon as the individual was identified as a threat, they were...
No. What do you consider to be a threat? A man with a gun laying in a sniper position, a man that had a backpack, a man that had a bicycle, a man that had a rangefinder. At what point is he determined a threat?
An individual with a backpack is not a threat. An individual with a rangefinder is not a threat.
What about a man laying on a building that has direct line of sight of President Trump with a gun that people are screaming and pointing out? Is that a threat, Ms. Cheadle?
Once that individual was identified, they were neutralized.
No, they were neutralized. Crooks was neutralized after he shot President Trump in the face, Ms. Cheadle. Is he only a threat once he fires the weapon?
As soon as the counter sniper identified that individual, they were able to neutralize them.
How were people in the crowd? Okay, then let's just take it this way. People under your command did not consider him to be a threat, yet people in the crowd knew he had a gun and considered him to be a threat. That means that you are a complete failure as the director of the Secret Service, that people under your command don't perceive a man laying on a roof with direct line to the president with a gun. They don't perceive that to be a threat, yet the people in the crowd do. How is that possible?
That's the last question, but please answer the question, Ms. Director.
I'm not certain at this time how the information from the people in the crowd was relayed to any law enforcement personnel.
No, you knew, that everyone knew. The people there knew that there was a danger. They knew there was a threat to President Trump, and it was allowed to happen. Was there a stand-down order, Ms. Cheadle? Was there a conspiracy to kill President Trump?
Absolutely not.
Then how did this happen? And why are you still sitting here not turning in your letter of resignation?
Last question, but please answer, and then I'll recognize Ms. Presley. Please answer that question.
That is what we are investigating to determine.
We're waiting for your letter. We are waiting for your letter of resignation, and you really need to consider doing that before you leave today.
Now, I submit to you that is fucking remarkable. No timeline? Well, Director Cheadle, you're in luck. I have a timeline. July 13th at 5:10 p.m., Crooks is seen at the rally, and he becomes a suspicious person of interest about an hour before Trump walks up to the podium. 20 minutes later, law enforcement officers spot Crooks with a backpack and a golf rangefinder. They even take pictures. 22 minutes later at 5:50, Secret Service locates Crooks on the roof of a building about 150 yards from the podium where Trump was set to address the crowd. Then at 6 p.m., 8 minutes later, Trump walks up to the podium and speaks to the crowd. 12 minutes later at 6:12, rally attendees start pointing towards someone on a nearby roof with a rifle. A local law enforcement officer climbs onto that roof and sees Crooks with the rifle. Crooks points it at the officer, who falls off the building. Seconds after that, gunshots ring out, and about 26 seconds later, the shooter is neutralized. Then you got a minute to 7 minutes later, the Secret Service agents move Trump off the stage and into a security vehicle. It took them 7 minutes to do it. Now, don't give me that bullshit that you don't have a timeline with details. The incompetence throughout this entire event is just flat out shocking, and Congress didn't hold back, letting the director know, and good on them for it. Listen to this clip.
Because Donald Trump is alive, and thank God he is, you look incompetent. If Donald Trump had been killed, you would have looked culpable. There is no aspect of this that indicates that there has been any protection to Donald Trump. Not only should you resign, if you refuse to do so, President Biden needs to fire you, because 100%. His life, Donald Trump's life, and all the other people which you protect are at risk because you have no concept of the aspect that the security footprint needs to be correlated to the threat. I yield back.
Now let's talk about that last part he said, where he discusses the security footprint. He said the security footprint needs to correlate to the threat. So what does he mean? And I'm going to take this twofold. First, we're talking about Trump here. This ain't Jimmy Carter speaking in the 70s about peace and love. Like Trump or hate Trump, he definitely has some very passionate enemies here in the United States, and some of them would love nothing more than to see him get killed. That's just the facts. That fact alone should create more of a sense of urgency as it relates to his protection. And then there's something we found out about after the rally. And that was that the Secret Service knew about a very credible threat that was discovered out of Iran days before the Trump rally, and it related to killing Donald Trump. Not some random threat, but a verified threat. That's serious. The most talked about questioning of the director during this entire hearing was courtesy of Nancy Mace of South Carolina. And she focused on the Secret Service's failure to identify the shooter as a threat and some other topics. You got to hear this.
The chair now recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, the American people are watching, and they're wondering if there are any questions you can answer honestly today. So, Director Cheadle, I have a series of questions, very specific questions. I want very specific answers. Most of my questions are going to demand a yes or no answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay, my first question. Both sides of the aisle today have asked for your resignation. Would you like to use my 5 minutes to draft your resignation letter, yes or no?
No, thank you.
Was this a colossal failure?
It was a failure.
Yes or no? Was it a colossal failure is the question, yes or no?
I have admitted this is a terrible...
This is a yes or no series of questions. Was this a colossal failure, yes or no?
Yes.
Was this tragedy preventable, yes or no?
Yes.
Has the Secret Service been transparent with this committee?
Yes.
Would you say the fact that we had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today as being transparent, yes or no?
I have always been
yes or no? You didn't want to answer the question.
Committee.
We had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today. That is not transparent, by the way. You stated earlier, Secret Service is not political. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say leaking your opening statement to Punchbowl News, Politico's Playbook, and Washington Post several hours before you sent it to this committee as being political, yes or no?
I have no idea how my statement got out.
Well, that's bullshit. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record articles by Punchbowl News, Political Playbook, Washington Post, all done at 5:24 a.m., 6:12 a.m., 6:34 a.m., a solid 3 to 4 hours before this committee got your statement.
Without objection to ordered.
Okay. Is the Secret Service fully cooperating with our committee?
Yes.
Okay. You say you're fully cooperating with this committee. On July 15th, this committee sent you a list of demands of information that we wanted. Has the Secret Service provided this committee a complete list of all law enforcement personnel that were there that day? Have you done that? Have you provided a list to the Oversight Committee? Yes or no?
I will have to get back to you on that.
That is a no. Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th? Yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
Mr. Chairman, Mr.
Chairman, I want to.
Come on.
We have to maintain decorum in this committee, no matter how upset we get.
Have you provided any and all memos to this committee that we've asked you on July 15th? Have you provided all memorandums within the Secret Service?
I would have to get back to you on
that. That is a no. You are being dishonest or lying. You're being dishonest here with this committee. These are important questions that the American people want answers to, and you're just dodging and talking around it in generalities And we had to subpoena you to be here, and you won't even answer the questions. We have asked you repeatedly to answer our questions. This isn't hard. These are not hard questions. Have you provided us all communications from the Secret Service related to that day and that rally? Have you provided this committee? We've asked for this information on July 15th. Have you provided any of this information that this committee has asked of the Secret Service? Any of it?
I'll have to get back to you.
Have you even read this letter that we sent you? Did you even read this?
Yes.
Okay. And you have said you don't know, you have no idea. Well, the answer is no. We haven't gotten a single document or piece of information or data from you or your agency in related to the rally that we have asked you for. So was this attempted assassination of Donald Trump a failure of training or execution or both?
I think that those are answers that we need to examine.
Training, execution, or both? Which one?
I think those are answers.
All right. How many Secret Service personnel have lost their jobs due to this colossal failure?
At this time, none.
How many Secret Service personnel have been required to take a refresher course on how not to let people shoot Donald Trump?
Our personnel are currently operational. We are examining the facts of this investigation, and we will make the changes necessary.
What time did law enforcement become aware that there was an individual on the roof with a clear line of sight to President Trump?
I am still verifying timelines.
Of course. 9 days in, you have no answers. How many minutes went by between the time law enforcement saw and took photos of crooks and the shooting? How many minutes?
I am still verifying timelines.
57 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Well, I could not have said that any better. Yeah, she might have had some choice words in there, as I would have, but honestly, the situation probably called for it. And it's probably quite frustrating when you have someone you're questioning with the demeanor that the Secret Service director had. And look, demeanor is everything. You can tell a lot about someone by the demeanor they possess under pressure in a situation where they know they were on the wrong side of the argument. And to me, Cheadle seemed way too comfortable in that hearing. And that bothers me. It bothers me because it appears she has been put at ease. Someone somewhere has told her not to worry about it. Don't sweat it. Go in there, and regardless of what happens, you're not going to be in any trouble. I feel it in my gut. I could see it in her demeanor, and I don't like it one bit. She looked way too confident in her ability to evade the questions, almost like she didn't give a shit about how massive this security failure was under her watch. It bothered me. We were millimeters away from seeing a former president get his head blown completely off. And now, I'll be honest, when this first happened, I was not on the conspiracy bandwagon. I was not someone who thought our government had anything directly to do with this. Certainly there was a failure, and I initially chalked that up to just sheer incompetence. But now I'm convinced there's a lot more to this than we the people may realize. And that is scary. It's not who we are. Now, was there some actual incompetence? Absolutely. If you watch the video, and I know we've all seen the actual shooting, you saw that female Secret Service agent. She couldn't find her holster, and the female Secret Service agent, who tries as she must, right? She did everything she could to guard Trump, but she was just too damn short. Quite frankly, several of the male Secret Service agents that left him on that stage left him on there way too long, and that leads me to the whole DEI aspect of this. So for those of you that may be unaware, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is, in my opinion, a horrible way in which to run government, or really business for that matter. It requires government entities to hire not based off of the merit of an individual, but also based on certain criteria, like you must employ so many females or a certain amount of minorities or even those that identify as different genders. And the director of the Secret Service herself, Kimberly Cheadle, it is widely considered that she is a DEI hire, that she was promoted because she was a female and they needed a female in that role to satisfy DEI requirements. As a matter of fact, many of the Secret Service agents are DEI hires. And I want to make this completely clear. The vast majority of the Secret Service, FBI, CIA, local police are all good people who are doing this not for the money, but because they have it in them to do this. And there's no one out there that is blue more than this guy right here talking to you. But make no mistake about it, every industry has bad apples. Every company has bad apples. And look, on the subject of DEI, call me crazy, but I own 3 different businesses and I hire based off of one's ability to do the job. I don't care if you're black, white, Latino, male, female, whatever. If you can do the job, I want you working for me. Your race, your sex, it plays 0 part in that decision. And that is the way it should be. And I will note that many companies, they're slowly figuring out how detrimental DEI is to business. Microsoft, as an example, used to promote DEI heavily. Now they've completely done away with it, as have a lot of other large companies recently. And here's another fun fact for you. Right now, to be listed on NASDAQ, one of the questions you're asked is if anyone on your board is in a underrepresented community. Who on your board is LGBTQ? Who's black? Who's Latino? Who's disabled? All that. There is even a rule, y'all, known as the Board Diversity Disclosure Rule. What's that? That's a rule that requires companies trading on the exchange to have a member on their board who identifies as a female or as a member of an unrepresented community, racial, ethnic, minority, a member of LGBTQ, all of those things. Y'all, we are living in some crazy times. So what's all that got to do with a former president nearly getting his head blown off? Well, I think DEI specifically played a large role in the fact that this was even able to occur. While I do think there was a conspiracy component to this whole deal, I don't think a lot of people knew about it. And I do think that the Secret Service agents that were actually guarding the president were doing their best to do so. I just think their ability wasn't up to par. And I think DEI played a role. Yep, I used the term conspiracy. And honestly, I don't take any pleasure in doing it. There is no one out there more red-blooded American than me and more patriotic than me. But there's a lot of evidence coming out about this that it was the work of more than one shooter. None of the evidence is stronger than what I'm about to present to you. And I want to shout out this guy who came up with this and did the work. His name is Chris Mortensen. And he has a YouTube channel called Peak Prosperity. So go check him out. Give him a follow. This guy has done a great job of convincing me that there was more than one shooter on this day. And what he did was he broke down the sounds that you hear. And he presents a pretty good case of these sounds coming from different types of guns. And from a guy like myself who deals with sound and editing and things like that, I know what he's talking about here. So I'm going to play you a series of clips where he does just a bang up job of breaking that down, which incidentally should have been the Secret Service's job. But before I do, I want to note that CNN, who's not my favorite news source by any stretch, they actually did some audio forensic analysis themselves. And that happened the day after the shooting on the 14th of July. And they posted an article, and in that article, they said there were potentially 3 shooters and 3 different weapons. Now, when CNN is saying that, I want you to understand, they're no friend of Donald Trump's either. And this was the day after the shooting. But this guy, what he did was just in much more detail. So listen to this first clip.
Watch his shoulder. You see that? Watch his shoulder right there. And
now I know we're recording this on audio and you can't actually see what he's referencing as he's talking, but it's the video from the shooter actually being on the roof that we've all seen, where he's crawling around that roof. And I'm sure many of you have seen that. And it was right when the first shot went off that you hear that he pauses that video. And when that shot goes off, and at this time the shooter was still alive, there's no kickback. His shoulders don't move. There's no recoil. And that's important. Now, this guy had an AR-15, and I've shot him. They have some kick. There's no way he could have fired that gun without his shoulder moving. But yet, in that video, which was taken by someone in the crowd, he never moved. But we hear a shot. And I'll continue with this clip.
okay, so let's analyze this now. Let's go into this with a little bit more depth. So video 2, the way I score it, there's about 16.0 seconds from first to last shot, so very consistent with what we're experiencing on the first audio. So that's nice. They kind of line up pretty well. And here's the whole audio from all that screaming and the shots from video 2. We have in blue the first 3 shots here. We have more shots here from a second weapon. I'm not sure about this one. It has a very different sound that we heard. And here's the final last shot, which I believe is from, oops, sorry, don't have my thing. You don't know what I'm pointing at. This is the 5 that make a very distinct sound. Here's one with a very different crack in it. That's the 6th shot in the string. And then here we have the final last one, which I think is the sniper weapon, which is probably the one that put the bullet just over the left eye of Crooks on the roof. So we're going to take a closer look at the blue, the red, the blacks here and listen to these things. But once again, let's just listen very carefully, and we'll go back and forth until you're certain of this yourself. Here's just the first 3 shots from that video. I haven't done anything, no audio. I haven't done any enhancements. This is both of these video audio pieces are exactly pulled straight from the video itself. Nothing else. I haven't boosted any. I haven't done any filtering. Raw files. Okay. So, and by the way, every instinct in me was to try and minimize all the screaming, but I was like, nope. That just add, like, what did you do? And then there's questions. These are raw files. Here's 1, 2, and 3 to start. Okay. Listen to that again. And one more time. Okay. Now let's listen to the next string. Ooh. Yeah. Hear that? Yeah. So 6 sounds different to me, but here's an interesting thing. 1, 2, and 3, besides being muffled and further away, it doesn't have echoes. Here we have, this is a shot here, this one, this peak. Oh, darn it, I don't have my thing up again. Here we go. So this here is a shot. This is an echo. Very clearly an echo, and a shot in an echo, and a shot in an echo. Because you hear that, there's echoes coming off. So that also allows us, again, to analyze where was this gun. But first up, we just have an absolutely different sound between the first 3. There's no echo. It's much further away. It's more muffled. It's just not in the same place at all. But these next ones, very different sound, totally different weapons. Okay, full stop. We have 2 separate weapons. Plus, we have no echoes coming off of the first 3, and then we do have echoes coming off of the next set.
It's the pacing. The pacing is the issue. What you're trying to say is the sound doesn't match the pacing of the firing of the weapon. You hear 2 booms, and then you hear a series of booms really fast. So boom, 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 boom. And here's another interesting fact. Those 5 shots you hear in succession, those were so fast that when he broke them down by time, it would have been a world record for one person to be able to pull a trigger that many times in that short of a time span. It was like 0.775 of a second. That's not possible with just one gun. That's important. Now, there's also been a discussion about how many times Donald Trump asked for extra security for not only that event, but events prior to that. And it's been reported that he was denied extra security. As a matter of fact, Congressman Jim Jordan asked Director Kim Cheadle that question in the hearing. And here's what that sounded like.
Gentleman, years back. Chair now recognizes Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were you guessing or lying? The day after President Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, "The assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false." The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said, "That is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed." But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this: "Top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel." The next day, the New York Times said this: "Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail." So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests...
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is Mr. Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology, or other resources.
Well, tell the committee which it was. They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what did you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on...
What does some requests mean? How many times? Some indicate requests is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down? Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are times...
You didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This is your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the Secret Service talking. And what a change from absolutely false, unequivocally false to, oh, by the way, there were some times where we didn't give them what they wanted. That's a huge change in 5 days. And the fact that you can't answer how many times you did that, that's pretty darn frustrating, not just for me, but for the country.
I hear your frustration.
Let me ask you this. Were any of those requests denied to President Trump's detail after you knew about the Iranian threat?
What I can tell you, again, I don't know the specifics, is that there are times when we can fill a request. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a Secret Service asset or resource. We can fill that request with locally available assets.
You spoke to anyone at the White House since July 13th?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you talk to?
I have briefed the president and the vice president.
Talk to the First Lady?
No, I have not.
Talk to the White House staff? Anyone in the White House communications?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to the counter sniper who took the shot that took out the bad guy?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that conversation?
I would not want to reveal conversations that I've had with my employees.
But that's exactly the kind of information the American people want to know. American people who pay your salary.
I understand. This is an ongoing investigation, and
Who's all doing the investigating at Secret Service? I know the Inspector General, but is there also an internal investigation in addition to the Inspector General?
We are conducting a mission assurance investigation internally, yes.
You know what it looks like, Director? It looks like you won't answer some pretty basic questions. It looks like you got a 9% raise and you cut corners when it came to protecting one of the most important individuals, most well-known individuals on the planet. A former president, likely the guy who's going to be the next president. Looks like you guys were cutting corners. That's what it looks like to me. Is that true?
I am here today because I want to answer questions, but I also want to be cautious.
You might want to, but you haven't answered. I don't think you've answered one question from the chairman, the ranking member, or me. Well, we got a lot of other people asking. We'll see if your record improves. But right now, you haven't answered, I don't think, any questions. I yield back.
And a lot of people, many, which the number's increasing by the day, are concerned that this was an intentional act of government. Not necessarily from a flat out, hey, we're going to assassinate the former president, but by not doing anything about it, essentially allowing it to happen. Maybe making it easy for someone. And I truly hope and pray that's not the case. But with the lack of information by the government, it leads to that speculation. I just saw a poll where people were questioned on the very subject, and here are the results of that poll. 14% of the people polled believe it was a lone wolf assassin. 10% believe it was a conspiracy, but not a government-related conspiracy, meaning more than one person was involved, but not anyone in government. And how many people think it was a government-involved conspiracy? 77% higher, almost 8 out of every 10 people polled. This is what no information out of your government leads to. Complete distrust, warranted or not. You want to stop the theories, then start learning the art of freaking transparency. Speaking of conspiracy and more than one shooter, there's a video that raised both of my eyebrows circulating currently, and it was taken by an attendee of the rally. Now, the video is pointed at the water tower during the shooting where a bunch of attendees were actually saying the shots were coming from. And in that video, you can see a figure. And admittingly, it's very grainy, but it appears to be a human being that pops out just when the shots are fired. Then it looks like the figure ducks behind the top of the water tower and then appears again as more shots are fired out. And there's been no explanation for this. And the government has said absolutely nothing about it. Hold on to your ass, because what I'm about to tell you may have been the biggest shock of all for me personally. After this incident ended, do you notice there's all this footage from attendees, but we've yet to see any body cam footage? Well, people asked about that, and guess what? It doesn't exist. Butler County Sheriff's deputies have said their body cameras were turned off, and there is absolutely no footage from the incident via body cams. Now, I want to say this. There is a video that was released just today, well, the day that I'm recording this, and it shows police going onto the roof after Crooks was shot. I need to clarify, this is not body cam footage. It is helmet cam footage from those 3 guys you saw jump on the stage when the Secret Service jumped onto Trump in the fatigues. And any other body cam footage you can find out there was provided after the incident occurred, not during and not prior to the incident. That's important. And it gets even worse. When Cheadle was asked about the radio recordings from the Secret Service that day, guess what she said? There are no recordings of radio chatter at all. What the fuck? Y'all, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but something is. You can bet on it. Now, this podcast series is going to cover what is definitely the most historic, controversial election of our lifetime, maybe in history. And there are a lot of different parts to this election year as it relates to scandals, not only involved in the shooting, but how about the other scandals that have come out since the shooting? And I'm specifically talking about President Joe Biden, who in the week following the shooting has had, well, let's just say one hell of a week. So President Biden comes out last week and he says he would consider stepping down if something were to happen due to his health. This was asked after the debate, of course, and because so much pressure was on him due to his horrible performance from the Democratic Party, he came out and he said, hey, the only thing that's going to cause me to step down is my health. Just a few hours after mentioning that his health would be the only thing stopping him from running, guess what? He gets COVID. Then, a couple hours later, at an event, a lady comes out and she says, oh, unfortunately, Biden won't be at the event. He has to cancel his plans. He won't be here because he tested positive, and he's canceling upcoming dates as well as it relates to speaking events and such. Then, not long after that, we get the news that President Biden decides he's not going to seek re-election. Then, right after that, he tweets that Jill and I have decided to endorse Kamala Harris. A couple minutes later, the Clintons come out. They endorse Kamala Harris. Then AOC comes out. She endorses. And finally, everybody endorses Kamala Harris, including the Obamas. So people start digging into this. It was really strange because no one had technically seen or heard from Biden since he contracted COVID, supposedly. And there's a story out there that was actually leaked from police officials, speaking, of course, on the condition that they aren't revealed, that say there was an emergency situation involving the president, that these police officials were called and it was requested that the streets be closed so the president could be transported immediately to the hospital. So they start doing that. They start closing these streets. Then, mysteriously, there was a stand-down order. And a U.S. Secret Service official told the Las Vegas Police Department that they were going to medevac the president to Johns Hopkins. Now, the rumor mill at this point is that Joe Biden was dying or possibly already dead. And I got to be honest, when I heard this, I thought, well, this is bullshit. Crazy conspiracy theorist, adding to conspiracies, that sort of thing. However, something happened on the 22nd of July that definitely had me thinking it could possibly be true. Kamala Harris, she's doing a campaign event. She's out there talking to people, right? And she's talking about the president. And, you know, she's saying how much they love the president and all that stuff. And there's a part that some say she had a Freudian slip, I think it's called. And I want you to hear this clip.
It is so good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call, and we've been talking every day. We love Joe and Jill. We really do.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
Now, you heard. She started to say, Joe, I hear you on the recording, and then she stops herself, right? And corrects herself. And there's a lot of people out there that say this was pre-recorded. And let me educate everybody out there on something if they may not know with AI and the capability of it nowadays. I can actually record my voice and make it sound like Joe Rogan's. It's easy. It is extremely possible to fake a voice, regardless of whether it's Joe Rogan, Jim Chapman, or Joe Biden. So I don't know the answer here, but it's definitely strange. Just today, as I'm recording this podcast, there is a video out there where Biden covers, quote unquote, passing the torch to defend democracy. And he's in the Oval Office. And I just told you no one's seen or heard from him since his COVID announcement, other than that recording he did with Kamala. Well, that's still accurate. As I told you, there's such a thing as AI, and people, I'm telling you, these days with technology, it's not hard at all to take an old video of you sitting at a desk and making it look like you're talking in real time. I'm not saying that's what is occurring here. I want to be real clear on that. I don't think Biden is very, very sick, on his deathbed, or dead. I just haven't seen enough evidence yet to say that. But it's weird, and it's worth talking about. That's for sure. Now, this podcast is pre-recorded. So by now, by the time you're listening to this, the president may have come out in front of cameras. And I will recommend that he does if he hasn't done so. But as of this recording, no one has seen or heard from Joe Biden in over a week outside of that, what's alleged to be his recorded voice in which he's speaking to Kamala Harris that I just played you. Very strange. And it's also important to mention that there was a second day to the hearings in front of Congress. And on that second day, Homeland Security, the FBI, and the heads of the Secret Service all declined to testify in front of the Congressional Hearing Committee that is investigating this entire deal. And that should piss off every American. We pay them. They shouldn't have a choice in the matter. I'm going to say it again. If you want to avoid scandals, if you want to avoid conspiracies, don't hide the information from the American people. Be transparent. Show the fuck up. And there you have it. We're going to bring you more as it comes out. I promise you, I am not backing off of this scandal, of this investigation 1 inch. This cannot stand in the United States of America, and these people need to be held accountable, whoever they are and wherever they are. And look, there is more of this we are going to get into, so much more than what you've heard already. And we're going to bring it to you fast and furious. There's still a lot I have not covered, so look for that. Thank you again for listening and for Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.